The sky darkened as massive alien ships drifted silently above the cities, their shadows stretching like cold fingers across the land. Crowds gathered in awe and fear. The air buzzed with an unfamiliar energy, and humanity realized this was no ordinary encounter. Sirens wailed in the distance, and car engines sputtered as if the vehicles themselves sensed the weight of the moment. People stopped in the streets, staring upwards, their mouths open and their hearts pounding with a mix of terror and wonder. Children clung to their parents while the elderly squinted against the strange reflection of light bouncing off the ship's surfaces. The air smelled of ozone and something metallic that made throats dry and stomachs churn. The ships moved slowly, almost deliberately, as if studying every inch of the planet below, and shadows shifted across buildings, bending familiar streets into alien shapes. Drones hovered uncertainly around the edges of the city, recording what they could as governments scrambled to react, yet no human voice could compete with the silent authority of the vessels. They hovered over oceans and mountains and deserts, their presence bending the clouds into strange, swirling patterns. Birds fell silent mid-flight, and animals hid as the energy radiating from the ships penetrated forests and cities alike. A low hum began to vibrate through the ground, through the metal of bridges, through the concrete of skyscrapers, as if the planet itself was resonating with the arrival of something incomprehensible. Satellites flickered in orbit, and communications faltered, leaving people to rely on eyes and instincts more than machines. The ocean reflected the colossal shadows, turning waves into dark rivers of fear and fascination. Ships circled each other in formations that no human army could replicate, patterns that seemed intentional and impossible at the same time, while flashes of light ran along the holes like messages meant to be seen but not understood. Rumors began to spread from city to city, tales of people who claimed they saw figures moving inside the ships, glowing faintly as if alive and aware of every heartbeat of every human witnessing them. News outlets scrambled to show images, but no camera could capture the scale or the weight of presence, and so everyone relied on word of mouth and personal experience, which made the moment both intimate and universal. In parks and streets, people whispered and shouted at the same time, sharing disbelief and terror. Strangers held hands because they could not stand alone, and even those who had once denied the possibility of life beyond Earth now prayed and wondered if prayers could reach through the void. The hum grew deeper and reverberated in every bone and every thought, as if testing the courage and resolve of the species below. And then a pulse of light swept across the land, making shadows dance and hearts skip a beat. It was beautiful and horrifying at once, and people felt both incredibly small and inexplicably connected to something vast and unknowable. The ships did not attack, they did not move aggressively, they simply existed, and that existence challenged every certainty humanity had ever held. Scientists rushed to measure the energy, the light, the strange gravitational fluctuations, but even their most advanced instruments faltered, as if the universe had put up a wall for those not ready to understand the meaning of the presence. Above, in the midst of panic, there was fascination. Children pointed excitedly as if the sky itself had become a playground, and old poets whispered verses that had never been spoken aloud, feeling suddenly understood by the silence hovering over the cities, and everywhere people wondered what this arrival meant for the future of the planet and for themselves alone. And together, trembling and staring into the darkened sky, they waited for the first words. The first sign, the first choice that would tell them whether the world would change forever in an instant, or over decades. The air was thick with possibility and fear, and the hum from above became a pulse felt deep in the chest, marking the first moment of humanity's reckoning with forces it had only imagined in dreams and nightmares. World leaders spoke into cameras, their voices trembling yet firm, promising friendship and understanding, appealing to a sense of peace they had hoped would transcend species. But even as words flowed across screens and radios, the alien ships remained silent above the cities, hovering over oceans and mountains, over deserts and forests, their presence oppressive yet mesmerizing. Citizens watched, anxiously glued to every screen, every broadcast, every social media feed. The streets were quieter than usual. People moved slowly, uncertain of what to do. The hum from the ships seemed to grow louder and resonate inside every chest, every thought, and every heartbeat. Emergency broadcasts repeated the same phrases, urging calm cooperation and calm compliance. Scientists and linguists worked frantically trying to decode the pulses of light flickering across the alien hulls. patterns that might contain a message that might indicate intent. Their equations and simulations multiplied across every server and computer in the world as they tried to find meaning in something that might be beyond human comprehension. Yet in homes and offices, people debated, endlessly arguing over what the ships wanted, why they had come, and whether humanity had a chance at survival. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. Some claiming the arrival was a punishment for centuries of environmental destruction, others insisting it was a test of intelligence and morality. Religious leaders called for prayer vigils and fasts while skeptics mocked their efforts, yet even the mockers felt a strange chill in the presence of the hovering giants, and children drew pictures of glowing beings in their bedrooms, hoping for friends or fearing monsters. At night the ships remained perfectly still, their surfaces reflecting sunlight and city lights in impossible ways, like liquid mirrors capturing the world below and distorting it into visions that felt like dreams and nightmares. Combined journalists reported from rooftops, from boats, from mountaintops, their words trembling but filled with awe and desperation. Every attempt to communicate with the aliens through sound, light, or radio waves failed, as if they existed in a language that was not ours or a dimension we could not perceive. The governments convened emergency councils in secret locations, beneath the earth, under mountains, in bunkers, designed to withstand earthquakes and war, yet none of these precautions brought comfort. The hum of the ships penetrated every wall, every shield, every thought. People began to sense an intelligence watching them, weighing every gesture, every collective breath, and the unease was almost tangible in the streets. Small communities gathered to discuss what action should be taken. People debated whether to surrender technology, to show submission, or to hide it, hoping the aliens would not recognize their capabilities. Scientists proposed launching peaceful signals into orbit, bursts of encoded music, mathematics, and images of humans raising hands in greeting, but even these efforts felt fragile and insignificant against the immensity above. The anxiety built slowly like a storm in every home, in every city, in every village. The hum pulsed in time with hearts and minds, leaving no one untouched. Philosophers speculated on the meaning of existence and human morality under such scrutiny, as if the very being of humanity was being measured for worth, and the world held its collective breath, waiting for the first gesture, the first acknowledgement, a sign that the words of peace had been received. Yet the ships offered no hint, no motion, no flicker that could be translated into meaning, only the hum, the light, the weight of presence, and the knowledge that humanity's future rested on a hope as fragile as a whisper carried across the void. As the sun set blood-red and shadows stretched across the land, the leaders continued to speak and broadcast their pleas for understanding. Even as the citizens stared into the darkened sky, united in fear and wonder, and the first lesson of the encounter became clear, that silence could be as terrifying as aggression, and that peace must be proven and chosen in ways that words alone could not guarantee. The ships emitted a low hum that shook the ground, and the ocean's waves rose as if answering a call. Humans tried to communicate their intentions, sending signals and lights and broadcasts into the void, hoping for acknowledgement or at least a sign that their gestures were understood, but every attempt met only silence, and the alien presence seemed heavier, as if weighing every choice, every heartbeat, and every thought. The people of Earth watched as the ships shifted slightly above the cities, in formations that defied gravity and logic, patterns that no human mind could replicate. The hum deepened, resonating through the bones and shaking the minds of all who listened. It was not loud, yet it was undeniable, a vibration that touched memory and fear in equal measure. Governments scrambled, sending fleets of aircraft and satellites to probe or intercept, yet nothing could reach them, nothing could disturb the silence that enveloped the vessels. It was a silence filled with judgment and unspoken power. In homes and offices, people clung to their routines, but even mundane tasks felt impossible, as the alien presence made every action seem both fragile and absurd. Children asked questions that adults could not answer, and adults whispered prayers that seemed to dissolve into the charged air. Philosophers and scientists debated endlessly on television and radio, on the streets and in private homes, discussing whether the aliens were intelligent, benevolent, hostile, or indifferent. While each theory felt like both salvation and doom, social networks exploded with images, videos, and eyewitness accounts, many conflicting, yet all sharing the same underlying terror, that nothing could prepare humanity For what came next, the sky changed. Subtly, light flickered across the ships in ways that defied physics, making clouds glow and shadows dance in impossible angles. While on the ground, people felt vertigo, nausea, and awe, as if the entire planet was being turned inside out by observation. Military analysts tried to understand the patterns of light, but concluded only that the aliens were deliberate, precise, and utterly indifferent to human comprehension. The air itself seemed charged. Electricity and static prickled the skin and made hair stand on end. Every animal responded in kind. Dogs barked at the sky, cats hid in corners, birds fell silent mid-flight, and fish swam in confused patterns under the suddenly churning waters. The world seemed to pause, waiting for a sign, and then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ships began to move away, forming a pattern that seemed final, a signal of rejection, as if every gesture of peace and communication had been weighed and dismissed. Humanity felt a collective shiver, a mixture of relief, that they were not instantly destroyed, and terror, that they were being evaluated for reasons beyond understanding. Yet the rejection was clear. No words, no signals, no acknowledgement came back, only the hum, the immense presence, and the knowledge that the aliens had seen everything and decided that humanity was not worthy of direct engagement, or perhaps they had seen everything and chosen to wait for a later judgment. The leaders tried to reassure the public, sending more broadcasts promising strategy, unity, and hope, but the silence above made every word hollow and fragile. In the streets, people wept, some in relief, some in despair, while others stared upward, their faces lit by the glow of the ships, like candles in a storm. The rejection was not violent, but it was absolute, and it carried the weight of inevitability that no human could deny. As the ships lingered on the horizon, like silent judges, humanity realized for the first time that peace alone might not be enough, and that the cost of failure could be unimaginable. In secret bunkers on mountains, beneath oceans, and hidden deep within cities, humanity mobilized its greatest minds. Engineers, scientists, and artists working together as never before. The rejection had ignited a fire of urgency that could not be ignored. Laboratories hummed with machines, synthesizing materials that had never existed. Computers ran simulations faster than thought, analyzing data from every angle, while teams of mathematicians coded messages designed to bridge the gap between species. Light and sound waves were manipulated into patterns that could convey emotion, logic, and intent. Simultaneously, artists painted visions of humanity's hope and fear, translating feelings into forms that machines could transmit. Musicians composed harmonies that echoed the heartbeat of the planet, as engineers built transmitters that could send these signals beyond the atmosphere and into the void. Governments allocated every resource, every ship, and satellite to ensure the message could reach the alien fleet. Before it departed, the pressure was immense. Every second counted, every failure was unthinkable. Technicians worked without sleep, their hands trembling over consoles, knowing that a single miscalculation could erase the last chance for understanding. Students and volunteers joined in decoding and encoding, experimenting with forms of communication that defied human convention. The world became a hive of controlled chaos, a network of intellect and desperation woven together by the knowledge that survival depended on connection. The skies remained filled with the looming ships, their presence a constant reminder that time was slipping away. The streets below, emptied as civilians, followed instructions to stay safe, yet many looked upward, unable to tear their eyes from the looming shapes that reflected the colors of sunset and fire, in impossible patterns. Even children sensed the urgency building around them. They drew intricate designs and letters, trying to contribute in their own way. Every effort, however small, felt monumental. Every pulse of light or vibration from the ships sent waves of adrenaline through the humans below. The message had to be perfect. It had to convey everything that words alone could not. The leaders spoke quietly among themselves in underground chambers, discussing strategy, diplomacy, and the limits of what could be achieved under observation. Yet, even as plans were drawn, it became clear that hope alone would not suffice. Action, precision, and creativity had to combine into something extraordinary. A countdown began, not on clocks but in minds, hearts, and nervous systems. Humanity measured time in breaths, taken together in pulses of collective effort, in the trembling of hands over machines and instruments every night. Bunkers glowed with the flicker of screens, casting shadows of determined faces across walls, while above the stars seemed dimmed by the ship's immense presence. Every calculation, every artistic stroke, every musical note became a testament to human resilience and unity, and slowly, a coherent plan took shape, a final transmission that could capture the essence of an entire species, a signal that carried the weight of billions of experiences, thoughts, dreams, fears, and hopes, encoded in ways meant to transcend language and culture and logic. The day approached when the message would be launched into the void, and as the humans prepared for that moment, they felt both pride and terror, knowing that in a single pulse the fate of their planet might hang in the balance, and that nothing in history had prepared them for the enormity of what they were about to attempt. The final message launched into the void, a luminous ribbon of light weaving through the darkness like a fragile bridge between worlds. The massive transmitters hummed and vibrated as circuits flared with energy, and humans below watched screens and instruments with bated breath. Every calculation, every code, every artistic and musical note became part of a tapestry meant to speak beyond words. The words "peace was our choice" echoed through the signal, but so did emotion, fear, hope, longing, and courage. Each pulse of light and vibration carried the heartbeat of billions of people. The air in the control rooms was thick with tension. Sweat ran down foreheads and hands trembled over consoles. Technicians, engineers, and scientists spoke in hushed tones, knowing that one wrong adjustment could shatter the fragile attempt at communication. The sky above remained dark and silent, the alien ships hovering like enormous sentinels, casting long shadows over forests, oceans, and cities. As the signal rose into orbit, it seemed almost alive, glowing with a soft warmth and intensity that defied human comprehension. For a moment, it felt as if the planet itself had become part of the message, a living pulse of intent and feeling flowing outward into the blackness beyond the atmosphere. Satellites and drones relayed the light and sound as it accelerated toward the alien fleet. The people on Earth could only watch and wait, their eyes fixed on screens, telescopes, and instruments, as if staring could somehow guide the signal along its path. The words of peace were accompanied by images of human kindness, acts of creation and resilience, moments of triumph over adversity, all encoded in patterns of light and vibration that transcended the boundaries of language and culture. Music flowed through the signal, harmonies built on the rhythms of hearts and nature, the melody intertwined with mathematical sequences conveying logic and emotion. Simultaneously, it was the essence of humanity, packed into a pulse of energy and intent. The countdown had ended, and now only hope and vulnerability remained in the minds of all who had worked tirelessly. The silence that followed the launch was profound. No immediate response, no flicker, no acknowledgement, yet the presence of the alien ships seemed to shift subtly, as if the pulse had reached them and registered somewhere deep beyond human understanding. People held their breath, feeling a strange vibration in their chests, a resonance that mirrored the pulse of the signal itself. Some whispered prayers, others simply stared into the night sky, unable to tear their eyes away from the hovering giants. The transmission traveled light years in seconds, reaching across the vast emptiness of space, yet it carried not just information but the weight of emotion, the hopes of generations, and the desperate plea for recognition of humanity's choice for peace. It was a declaration and a question at once, a moment of vulnerability and courage. Wrapped in every flash of light, every oscillation of the signal, the world waited in tense silence, united in a way never seen before, connected not just by fear but by the shared act of sending something human into the void, something meant to reach minds that might never have understood words alone. And as the signal sped outward, across the endless dark, the people of Earth realized that this pulse carried their essence, and that the universe might never again hold such a single, fragile, concentrated act of hope and defiance. Days passed with no response, and the silence from the alien ships became almost unbearable. The world held its breath. Every sunrise brought a fresh wave of anxiety, and every sunset cast longer shadows of dread over cities and forests. The pulse of the final message had traveled into the void, and yet nothing returned, no flicker, no light, no vibration, no sign that the aliens had received it or understood it. People began to speak in hushed tones, in homes and streets, in offices and schools, wondering what the silence meant. Was it indifference? Was it contemplation? Or was it something worse? The skies remained filled with the massive hovering vessels, casting shadows that moved slowly with the passing hours. Clouds twisted around their forms, reflecting impossible colors, and the air carried the hum that vibrated in bones and minds alike. The media repeated images of the ships over and over. Analyses and expert commentary could offer no comfort as each new day stretched longer than the last. Families gathered and argued about what to do. Governments convened in secret, trying to interpret the silence, hoping it was a pause and not a verdict. Scientists recalculated trajectories, simulations of alien perception and response, trying to find a pattern in the stillness, while psychologists tried to soothe populations gripped by anxiety and insomnia, yet nothing could fill the emptiness of non-response. Children asked questions that adults could not answer, and adults whispered prayers into the void, hoping someone or something was listening. The hum grew almost like a voice in the minds of those who paid attention, vibrating in rhythm with their own fears and hopes. It was a constant reminder of the alien presence that watched above, and perhaps within every thought. The world had never been so quiet yet, so loud with tension. Every routine became loaded with meaning. Every glance at the sky carried a question. Every movement on the ground seemed insignificant in comparison to the silent judgment hovering overhead. Small communities held vigils, staring at the sky, waiting for the faintest signal to indicate that the message had been received or ignored. Rumors and speculations ran rampant, some claiming that the aliens were deliberating, others insisting they were preparing for action. The markets faltered, not from fear of immediate destruction, but from the crushing weight of uncertainty, as if the very fabric of society had been stretched thin by weeks of unbroken tension. In the streets, people whispered to each other, creating a fragile network of shared fear and hope. Humanity had never felt so small and so connected all at once, and yet no one could deny that even the strongest hearts were beginning to falter. The alien ships did not move aggressively, they did not attack, they simply existed in perfect silence above, and their very stillness spoke louder than any weapon. Every pulse of light, every shimmer across the hulls seemed deliberate yet inscrutable, and people wondered whether the absence of response was the ultimate test of patience. The universe had put humanity on trial, and the world waited with bated breath for the first sign that might indicate whether peace had been acknowledged or rejected. The silence became almost a living entity, pressing on every thought, every emotion, every decision, and the humans who once looked to the sky with hope now looked with a mixture of fear, fascination, and dread. For the first time, the scale of what they had attempted to communicate and the weight of their own vulnerability became painfully clear, and in that silence humanity confronted the possibility that they might have reached the edge of understanding, and that the next moment could bring salvation or annihilation. Then the sky tore apart with searing light, cities crumbled, oceans boiled, and storms raged as if Earth itself was rebelling against its own kind. Alien fire rained from above, and humanity saw the cost of misjudged patience and the fragile boundary between peace and annihilation. The hum that had lingered for weeks escalated into a roar, vibrating through the ground, through concrete and steel, and through every bone and nerve. Humans screamed and ran for cover, buildings collapsed under strange energy pulses, cars were thrown as if by invisible hands, and bridges buckled and fell into rivers and streets. The seas churned violently, waves towering higher than skyscrapers, consuming coastlines and swallowing ports. Forests ignited spontaneously, flames that moved with unnatural precision, consuming everything in their path. Animals fled in chaos or perished in silence, and the winds carried the acrid smoke over continents, painting the skies red and black. Entire regions were blanketed in fire and debris, and the atmosphere itself seemed to tremble with an intelligence that was neither cruel nor careless, but deliberate and absolute. Emergency sirens wailed across cities and nations, and yet they offered no comfort, as the alien presence above proved impossible to combat. Military forces fired every weapon from every platform, from jets, tanks, and ships, but none of it made contact or even altered the path of the destructive forces. The humans realized with horror that their technology was insignificant against what hovered above their heads. Even the most advanced missiles disintegrated before reaching the ships, or were absorbed into unknown fields of energy, and every attempt to retaliate only highlighted the helplessness of the species below. From rooftops, people screamed at the sky, their voices carried over the wind and fire, but no sound reached the alien vessels. Yet in the chaos, Some found clarity, some found purpose, survivors helping the injured, pulling the trapped from rubble, sharing water and food. Despite the storms of destruction and fire in the streets, communities formed instant networks of aid and communication. The first instinct was not surrender, but preservation and defiance in the face of incomprehensible power. While skyscrapers fell and rivers overflowed, underground bunkers filled with trembling families and groups of engineers and scientists working desperately to maintain communications and monitor the alien activity. Satellites in orbit were knocked off course. The auroras over the poles burned green and red, unnaturally, and lightning struck unpredictably as if the planet itself were reacting to the intrusion. The humans could only watch as waves of energy descended from the ships, striking with precision that suggested not malice but purpose. Every pulse flattened entire cities, forests, and infrastructure, leaving only echoes of what had been. And in the aftermath of each strike, the silence returned briefly, a terrible calm before the next wave of destruction began. Humanity realized that the alien forces were not blind or indiscriminate. They were measuring, observing, cataloging reactions, and yet every eye that looked upward felt the weight of inevitability, as if the universe itself had delivered a lesson in power and consequence. And even those who survived could not shake the knowledge that this retaliation had been both a warning and a reckoning, and that the world they had known had ended in the fire of observation and judgment. Amid the chaos, a lone signal persisted, glowing defiantly across the skies, cutting through smoke, ash, and debris like a fragile promise. Humanity had thought it was over, that all attempts at communication had been meaningless, that survival itself was impossible. Yet the signal pulsed with unwavering clarity. A message encoded in light and sound that carried the essence of a species determined to be understood despite destruction, despite fear, despite despair. It was the words, "Peace was our choice. Vengeance is our answer," burned into the minds of the few survivors like fire etched on stone, a reminder of what had been attempted and what had been provoked. As the signal moved through the atmosphere and into the orbit of the alien ships, every flicker, every oscillation seemed deliberate, as if the message had reached an intelligence that finally acknowledged it. On the ground, people stared upward, faces streaked with soot, sweat, and tears, unable to believe that in the midst of obliteration, a communication had endured. Some fell to their knees, whispering the words over and over, as if saying them aloud could anchor them to reality and keep hope alive. Scientists and engineers who had labored endlessly to create the final transmission watched consoles with shaking hands, eyes wide in disbelief, knowing that what they had sent had survived forces far beyond comprehension. And the ships above seemed to shift subtly, their immense presence almost contemplative, as if the pulse of the signal had touched something deep and unmeasurable in their consciousness. The survivors felt a mixture of awe and terror, a fragile understanding that the act of sending the message had changed something irrevocable. The words themselves carried multiple layers of meaning, declaring both a choice and a warning, asserting the capacity for peace, while acknowledging the strength to respond to aggression. The cities that remained standing glowed faintly with fires and emergency lights as groups of people gathered to witness the phenomenon together, strangers holding hands, sheltering one another, their shared gaze toward the sky creating a fleeting moment of unity. Amid devastation, philosophers whispered interpretations. Debates erupted over the significance of the signal, whether it was a surrender, a challenge, a proof of resilience, or a call to further reckoning. Yet all who observed felt the weight of the alien gaze, a presence that seemed to comprehend far beyond human logic. The energy of the signal resonated with the planet itself, vibrating through mountains, oceans, and forests, and leaving an indelible impression on all who remained. The survivors began to document every detail, every flicker of light, every pattern in the pulse, knowing that history would remember this moment as the turning point, as the revelation that humanity had reached across the void and declared its existence and intent, and that the universe had responded in ways that were inscrutable but undeniable. The hum of the ships softened almost imperceptibly, and for the first time the silence that had once pressed like a living thing against every mind was interrupted by the recognition that humanity had not simply pleaded for survival, it had asserted itself, it had communicated a truth about its nature. A message that would echo across the ruins and across generations as a reminder of courage, defiance, and the duality of hope and vengeance, and that, in this revelation, the story of the last message from Earth had found its mark and left an imprint on the cosmos that could never be erased. Those who remained wandered through the ruins of cities, forests, and towns, looking up at the empty skies and remembering the fire, the hum, the overwhelming presence that had descended upon them, and in that silence they felt both grief and resolve. Survivors moved cautiously among debris and ash, searching for others in the shadows and among toppled buildings. They found strangers who became companions, sharing water, food, warmth, and stories of what had happened in the hours before the skies had torn and the oceans had boiled, and they learned to trust each other quickly. Because trust had become as vital as air, the few remaining leaders and scientists documented everything, every signal, every flicker, every pulse of the final message, cataloging it in hopes that future generations would understand and perhaps learn from the attempt at communication. Humanity had offered peace and endured vengeance, and the lesson had been written not only in technology but in the hearts and minds of those who survived. The planet itself bore scars that would last centuries. Forests regrew slowly over blasted landscapes, rivers carried debris for miles, and the air remained thick with ash and memory. The humans who remained looked to the stars differently now, with a mixture of humility, awe, and a cautious understanding that they were no longer alone in a universe that could judge and respond in ways unimaginable. Schools and communities began to rebuild, not just with walls and roofs but with teachings of unity, courage, and vigilance. The words, "Peace was our choice, vengeance is our answer," became a mantra repeated in whispers, and allowed a reminder of what had been attempted and what had been provoked as new generations were born and raised under skies that remained watchful. Humanity learned to value every gesture, every choice, and to recognize that power and compassion must coexist if survival was to be more than temporary. In the ruins, artists created murals, sculptures, and music to commemorate the message, the signal, and the judgment that it followed. These works were not only memorials but guides, reminding all who beheld them that peace must be defended and that vengeance is a shadow always present. When provoked, scientists continued to study the remnants of alien technology and energy patterns, hoping to understand the forces that had judged them and perhaps to prepare for future encounters. Each discovery carried both excitement and caution, and humanity approached the unknown with eyes open and hearts alert. Communities formed networks across continents, sharing knowledge, survival techniques, and philosophies designed to ensure that if the universe tested them again, they would be ready. The story of the last message became legend, whispered across generations, taught in schools, and recounted in families as the moment when Earth had reached out and declared its essence and had been challenged in return. The survivors understood that their species was both fragile and formidable, capable of peace yet capable of wrath, and that this duality must guide every future choice and every action in the years that followed. Monuments were erected, not only to honor those lost but to mark the determination of those who remained to preserve and rebuild the world, and the legacy of courage, defiance, and hope became intertwined with the memory of loss and judgment. And as the children of survivors looked to the night sky and saw the stars glittering like distant fires, they whispered the words their ancestors had sent across the void. Peace was our choice, vengeance is our answer, carrying them forward across generations into a future shaped by the lessons learned in fire and silence and light.